We're going to give a quick overview of the Design Impact Group at Dahlberg and the opportunities that we have for internships over the coming months. We're going to first have a quick run through of a small presentation that we've put together that hopefully can bring to life what we do here, what it's like to work here, and the opportunities themselves. And then we want to open up the floor for questions and answers. But it would be great if throughout the presentation, as you have questions, you could just enter them into the chat on YouTube. One of us will also be in that chat, sort of responding to questions as they arise. So yeah, that's what we'll do. My name, by the way, is Michael Mori. I am a creative lead here at the Design Impact Group at DIG. That's what we call it for short. I focus a lot on financial service design for the poor and for underserved communities around the world. A lot of the work I do is sort of behavioral research and service design. My background is not sort of like a traditional design. I did not go to design school. I did not do a master's in design. I actually came from the international development and the policy field, and sort of made my way into DIG through ethnographic research and program design. So there are others like me at DIG who do not have the traditional design background, which sort of illustrates sort of both our openness to people from different experiences, as well as the fact that the projects and the problems that we work on are like really multifaceted in nature and require a broad set of skills and capacities to address. And so we try to reflect that in the composition of our staff. We've also got Kristen on the line. I'll let her introduce herself right now.
Hi guys, this is Kristen Schlott. I'm a senior designer at DIG based in our Nairobi office. I guess I'll give a little intro too. So my background is actually digital product design, although I wasn't trained as a digital product designer. My undergrad degree was environmental studies and environmental engineering. And I became a self-taught designer shortly after that, working in San Francisco Bay Area, working with some design agents, and was a summer fellow with DIG through my design program. And once I joined, I never left. And we will explain why.
Thanks, Kristen. Okay, cool. So we're going to just quickly hop into the presentation and work through this so that we can open up the floor to questions, because we're sure you guys have a lot. Okay, so, sorry, one second. Technical difficulty. There we go. Okay, so you can see a picture of both Kristen and I here. We're the two people on the bottom. Here you also see Robert Fabricant. He's one of the two founders of the Design Impact Group. He and a guy named Ravi Chatpar came over from Frog Design. Robert was the head of creatives, and Robert was the head of Ravi was the head of strategy. So they came over a few years back and founded the Design Impact Group, sort of as an experiment in sort of design and development, design and international development, that is. It's been pretty successful over the past 2.5, 3 years, and we'll get into some of the details on that. You also see Melanie Call here, who may join us in a bit. She's on her way into the studio right now. She's a design lead as well with me here in New York. So in this presentation, we want to really cover 4 things. The first is give you an overview of DIG, who we are and how we work. The second is to really make that concrete with some project examples. And then we, of course, want to talk about the opportunities for internships and working with us. Then we'll open up for discussion. Okay, so the Design Impact Group, as I said, was founded 2.5 years ago, but Ravi and Robert sort of incubated it inside of a broader strategy consulting firm called Dahlberg. Dahlberg has been around for, I think, almost 17 years now. I think it was founded in 2000 or 2001, and has grown to about 350, maybe 400 people around the world. So in this map, you can see all of the places around the globe where Dahlberg has offices. So there's a lot in Africa and Asia, as well, of course, in North America, South America, and Europe. But DIG also has 4 studios. We're in New York, London, Nairobi, and Mumbai. So that coming soon, actually, that has already come. We just launched the studio in Mumbai, and we're seeking to expand both there in Nairobi and in New York. So Dahlberg, I'll give you a quick background of the firm and then sort of where DIG fits in. It's Dahlberg is a strategy consulting firm, but it's specifically focused on social impact and the development space, international development, to be specific. That isn't to say that we don't work on domestic issues. We do, but the majority of our portfolio is international in nature. So Dahlberg, like most strategy consulting firms, really leverages a lot of sort of core consulting skills, in business planning, financial modeling, quantitative analysis, market and landscape assessments, etc. And that's actually really good for us, because as a design firm, as a small design firm at that, we don't necessarily have a lot of those capabilities, sort of within our own team. But as a part of Dahlberg, we are constantly pulling in our colleagues from the broader strategy firm to help us with projects. And the combined skill set that we're able to bring really does expand the range of projects that we work on in a really interesting way that I think you probably don't really see at many other design firms. And we'll get into that a bit when we provide some project examples. But DIG, what we do is, we kind of anchor our design approach in something called human-centered design, which I'm sure most of you, if you're on this call, have heard about, read about on our website, possibly read about or experienced or practiced in your own studies, in your own career. But human-centered design is really an approach that was honed in the private sector over the past 15, 20 years by firms like Frog, like IDEO, and only recently has been applied to the international development space. In development, people have been doing ethnography and they have been doing qualitative research, for a long time, but they hadn't really been sort of doing that with a specific design angle, and had not been doing that in a way that leverages some of the methodologies and processes that HCD brings to the table. But DIG is not just a human-centered design firm. We also, work a lot with systems thinking, because many of the problem spaces that we work in are very, very complicated with lots of different stakeholders, and a lot of moving parts. And so that's a real helpful way at that to sort of address like a broader ecosystem of players in a challenging environment. And then finally, our methodology is agile. We do a lot of like rapid and iterative prototyping, tight like design sprints and cycles and such. So we'll get into more detail on all of this when we give you some project examples. This is just a picture of Dahlberg, the firm. This is actually a few years old. So I think this is maybe 120, 150 people here. We're double that now. but those stats are pretty much the same that you see on the bottom. We're still a 60-40 split between women and men, including at the partner and the leadership level. We represent over 40 nationalities and more than 60 languages spoken, so it is truly diverse. Dahlberg really does, we have 17 offices around the world, and we really do hire locally as much as possible. The same is true for DIG. It's a bit tougher to find the type of design skills that we're looking for in some of the places where we have studios. Particularly like Mumbai, which is new, and there's a huge design culture in India at the moment, though it is growing. So there are opportunities for hires from places like East Africa, Europe, the United States, etc., Asia, to be staffed in our studios around the world. So we don't hire exclusively locally, but we do like to hire locals as much as possible. So as I mentioned, Dahlberg is a big firm, and DIG is only one part of it. There are also like 4 or 5 other entities within Dahlberg. One is DGDA, which means Dahlberg Global Development Advisors, and that is the strategy consulting arm of the firm. It is the largest arm of the firm. It probably has 300 staff members out of 400. But we also have a research team, an implementation team, and a capital advisory team. We've recently added 2 other companies which we sort of bought up and integrated. One focuses on quantitative surveying. So they're based in Nairobi. They're called Research Solutions Africa. You can look them up, which is really exciting because it means that we can do like tightly integrated qualitative and quantitative research. So we can leverage HCD and then use the capacities of this firm to sort of validate and kind of put some numbers to what we're sort of unearthing in our community-centered work. And we've also added another firm called that we're calling Dahlberg Data Insights, DDI, which is a big data analytics firm, which is also very cool because we can now crunch huge number sets, for example, from mobile network operators to get a better idea of consumer behavior, which we can plug into our processes. So than it otherwise would be. You can see some of the team. Kristen, if you would like, you can sort of take it from here and maybe just say a thing or two about the type of people that we hire, and then we can move on to the project examples.
Sure, thanks, Michael. So I'll just walk you through some of our lovely characters here on the DIG team and our team photo. I think this is a nice picture because I think it speaks to kind of the spirit of DIG, which at its core, I think is about humility, being down to earth, and being really excited and willing to engage with your fellow humans. You'll see, I guess I'll go through some of the backgrounds of some of the people on our team, because I know we had a lot of, excuse me, a lot of questions about what if I'm not a designer? What if I don't have like a hard design background? Am I still right for DIG? So we have Priyanka here in the front middle. Her background is technology. We have Elise, whose background is industrial design. Trevor, Michael, you can speak to his background a little bit better, but his background, I think, is more is finance and research. Is that right? You can chime in there.
Yeah. So Trevor worked with Clinton Health Access Initiative, CHI, part of the Clinton Foundation, and was basically a specialist in figuring out how to scale up essential medicines across Africa. So like antidiarrheals, anti-malaria, HIV treatment, etc. So he really came in at very much a policy angle, but he sort of had that on the ground experience, working in community health facilities across the continent, figuring out like what the barriers were to sort of adoption, usage, and scale of these medicines. And I think that that really is the common thread that sort of runs through all of us here. We all have some of that, that like foundational experience of working sort of on the ground or directly with people and communities, in sort of in a generative fashion.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. We also had some questions about how do you form a team structure for a DIG project? Like, what does a team look like? And I think it's been interesting who on our team has been pulled into which types of projects, like based on skill set and project fit. Right now, we have definitely a strong need for visual designers, which in the type of work we do, which is more strategy focused, we as designers kind of tend to think our work is less visual actually, but a big part of what we do is communication and communication design. So right now, for example, we do have a strong need for visual designers or people who are able to communicate visually and effectively. But at other times, as Michael mentioned, Trevor's skill set has become really valuable and actually helping with operations for the team. So because we are such a new young studio, we do kind of approach our operations in kind of startup mode still. So everyone on our team, as much as we are designers and strategists and researchers, we also wear the hat of me, for example, helping out with intern recruitment or setting up, communications pieces for our website or things like that. So everyone kind of contributes. And I think at different points in the year, kind of finds ways to make themselves valuable based on the uniqueness of their skill sets. So I think it's a really nice mix, in short. You can jump to the next slide, please. Yeah, so this is, I think, kind of talking about combining HCD, which Michael already talked about a little bit, but human-centered design, and talking about kind of how that actually manifests on the ground in the communities that we work with. So we also kind of our advanced questions about, well, how much time do you guys actually spend on the ground? And what does it look like to engage with these communities? Somebody asked, what about communities where infrastructure is an issue or communities that don't have access to certain resources? Well, that's kind of at the core of what we do, is engaging with not just end users, but looking at different players throughout an ecosystem or throughout a value chain, and understanding kind of the full system that we're working in and what are all of the constraints of the system, as well as maybe some of the rich resources of the system, and how can we design a solution that fits into that really specific scenario. Jump to the next slide, please. Yeah, so here's a nice snapshot of the HCD process. So as Michael mentioned, HCD is really just an approach, like a human-centric lens to approach kind of a typical iterative design process. So many of you might be familiar with what this process looks like, but it's roughly broken down into 3 phases. I mean, you can obviously add or take away different details here as you please, but in general, we're looking at a planning phase, which is all about kind of understanding the context and understanding, capacity of your stakeholders, capacity of the organizations you're working with and your clients, and kind of the feasibility of the types of interventions you're looking at. Really about, I think this is more of what people think of when they think of design. So this is thinking about taking that context, taking that background, and actually, coming up, creating solutions. Whether it's prototypes, whether it's a beta version of a product, whether it's a pilot product, and actually putting those things out in the world and testing them with users, measuring results and learning from them. So everything that we do, there's a strong component of we have an iterative approach to our work. Someone asked if we do waterfall approach. Definitely not. It's kind of a constant process of iteration. So constantly testing, constantly iterating, and then learning is another really important part of our work. So that's kind of one area where we work a lot with our consulting friends at DGDA, is looking at monitoring and evaluation. So taking our skill sets, looking at how things are working on the ground, but also maybe looking at systems data, or looking at if it's a digital product, looking at usership usage numbers, and how can we combine those type of quantitative metrics with qualitative insights and come up with like a real report of how are we actually impacting people's lives. So that learning component is definitely very critical. implementation phase, which we do, actually looking at what's working, what's not working, and how can we scale up across markets. So our next slide, yeah, this is, I'll go through this really quickly, but this is just looking at a typology of HCD projects. So this is kind of looking at different use cases, again, roughly mapped across that same process, that same design process. So how we would actually apply HCD to each of the stages, and what are some of the methods we're using along the way. So looking at that beginning point, the strategic framing, HCD is really important for, again, that kind of contextual insights, uncovering what does the ecosystem look like, understanding users, and why are users behaving the way they're behaving. And it's really about, I think, uncovering opportunity areas based on what you're seeing on the ground. And then rather than, a kind of solutions-led approach, it's looking at what is the opportunity area and how can we design something to fill that opportunity. Within program design, again, this is about, yeah, we can, I think, jump to the next slide. Yeah, I think, again, this is still kind of mapped across that same process. So looking at this middle column here, this is kind of the key design, the classic design part of the work, which is looking at designing, user testing, and prototyping. So this is actually coming up with prototypes, which can be, in the work we do, it can be anything from a really basic digital prototype, which could be like a USSD menu, like something like M-Pesa, for those who are familiar. Or it could be something a little bit more sophisticated. It could be a physical product, like an Ebola, protection suit for a health worker. Or it could be a service design. So it could be, about prototyping what is the way you approach a customer in the market versus a customer on a farm. Or it could be prototyping any number of service experiences, like what is it like to walk into a financial institution versus to pull information from a financial institution on your phone. Yeah, and so you can kind of look at this next slide here and see some of the clients we work with. Michael, I'll actually ask you to jump in here because I think you have some more insights than I do on some of these guys. But basically, we have a wide range of clients in both private and public sector that we've worked with.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
I'm happy to jump in. So, basically, DIG and Dahlberg more broadly works across sectors. So, a lot of our work, again, is dealing with like pretty hairy problems, like really difficult problems to solve that that aren't really clear, that can't be clearly defined as like, oh, this is simply, like a public health problem, or this is simply a consumer finance problem. Like oftentimes the lines are blurred, and as a result, a lot of like the partners we work with are sometimes, actually often, working in consortium. So a typical arrangement would be like, okay, CGAP, like at the World Bank, or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they want to tackle a tuberculosis related challenge in Indonesia. And so they realize that a big chunk of this is around people's behavior in seeking out care, maintaining sort of treatment regimen, and and returning to clinics and stuff for follow-up. So they would contract us. They would say, hey, we know you guys are really good at this sort of like behavioral research and design component. We want you to work with the World Health Organization and like a number of like local healthcare providers in Indonesia to sort of tackle this issue, and we will fund it. In which case, this project all of a sudden is bringing in players from the public sector, from the private sector, and we're sort of playing this role in the middle of everybody, trying to kind of sort of align the different stakeholders around the actual needs and behaviors of the end users. In this case, tuberculosis patients. So oftentimes our projects are like that, where we're working with a lot of different clients. But sometimes they're more pure plays. For example, if we're working with MasterCard on a merchant payment system for Kenya, that would be a MasterCard project. But anyways, that's just a quick overview of a few of the clients that we've had in the past. We have a lot more than these, but just a few to highlight. And here you see a few photos of you know, of our work, of our actual research process and our design process. Many of these photos are from user interviews, co-creation sessions, and like design workshops. So you kind of get a sense for what it actually looks like. But let's make that more concrete and actually talk about a few projects. So the first one is actually a project that Kristen has been working on for the last year, and it's a really exciting one. And I'll let her sort of talk about that. I don't want to spoil it.
Thanks, Michael. It is very exciting because the product was just launched into market over the weekend. But before we get there, I'll talk a little bit about the context and background for the project to give you a bit of an overview. So DigiFarm is, I know we've talked a little bit through the different types of projects we work on. DigiFarm is a pretty classic product design project. So we were working with an organization called Mercy Corps that is very invested in bridging the gap of access to financial services for smallholder farmers. And they work, for this work that they're doing, it's predominantly throughout East Africa, so Kenya, Tanzania, Zambia, some other countries. But one of the projects kind of aligned with that core initiative for Mercy Corps was an effort that was happening at the biggest telco in Kenya called Safaricom. Safaricom basically thought that they had a really good idea for a product in which they would provide access to discounted inputs for dairy farmers in Kenya. So they teamed up with Mercy Corps in order to, the idea was that this could both provide business value for Safaricom as a private business, and it could also provide value to farmers and ideally have some positive impact on the lives of farmers in terms of their income, their ability to handle financial shocks, et cetera. So we were brought into this consortium, this partnership, with a mandate of doing kind of the design research and product design. And the way we approached it was in 3 phases. So the first phase was this kind of opportunity area finding. So we went out for 2 weeks in the field with dairy farmers, not just dairy farmers, but looking at agrovets, which are the kind of small businesses that sell fertilizers and other supplies, medicines and things, veterinary medicines to smallholder farmers. We spoke with dairy co-ops, which are the big kind of aggregators and organizers of farmers in Kenya. And we tried to understand like really what are the needs. We know what Safaricom thinks they need, but like what are we actually seeing on the ground? And from that, we came back with a set of insights that included access to inputs like fertilizers, but also we found a lot of other really pressing needs for these smallholder farmers, and presented our research as such to the Safaricom team. And at this point, it was pretty exciting that the project was considered part of Safaricom's kind of social impact group. And once they saw the research and they kind of saw the potential that we saw for actually having a much broader impact on the lives of farmers. I mean, they see it in terms of business, but I think those visions are very much aligned. They actually switched the project into their kind of for-profit arm for the next 2 phases of work. Second phase was really about product design. So this was where we took our initial opportunity areas and built out some prototypes. You'll see in the pictures, Sue, that's one of our designers in Kenya, with some little paper phones and USSD menus that we were using to prototype what this thing would actually look like. In short, it's a little USSD app. For those familiar with M-Pesa, which is also run by Safaricom, kind of a similar menu in which they can access a variety of different services, like a bundled service provision. So we did prototyping, we did testing, and then we delivered to Safaricom at the end of phase 2 a pretty comprehensive set of pilot specifications, including product design specs, technical specs, ideas for mobilization, and then working with our consulting friends at DGDA, a go-to-market strategy, and some business cases for what we saw as a really exciting potential product in DigiFarm. So in short, Safaricom loved it, and they have been working the past and are piloting it in 3 regions in Kenya. And our job for this phase is to come back and do monitoring and evaluation, which I mentioned earlier. So we're going to be on the field seeing how it's perceived by farmers. Is it useful? Is it usable? Does it work? What can we do better? What are new feature ideas that could be included in the next generation of Digifarm? And then kind of what is the overall impact? So that was a long explanation, but very excited about this project right now. And with that, I will turn it over to Michael to talk about some other exciting types of projects that we've done.
Okay, so I'm going to go through these last 2 very quickly, just so we can talk about the opportunities here and take some questions. We recently did a project for USAID on Ebola response, and this was a grand challenge project. So there were a number of innovators, I think initially 10 or 12, which we sort of whittled down to 8, who we then supported over the course of almost a year to develop, test, and iterate on their innovations. With the financial support of USAID. Much of this work took place in Nigeria and Sierra Leone. So we had, our teams doing a lot of community-focused research in Ebola-affected areas. We did a lot of prototyping and testing of different products that the innovators had produced in those in those communities. One example is an Ebola response suit. So basically the suit that the first responders to Ebola wear as they are searching for people who are afflicted with Ebola, and then transporting them to clinics, or cremating their bodies. So those suits were pretty problematic during the last Ebola outbreak, and a lot of first responders died because of sort of the suits themselves and the procedures for putting them on and taking them off. So we were working with an innovator who had redesigned the suits, and we took these suits to a handful of communities and prototyped them and tested them with Ebola first responders, and basically had them just stress test the hell out of them, put the suits on, tear at them, just see how they would hold up. And then they made suggestions for how to improve it, which we integrated into a further iteration of the suit. And that was, a part of the a part of this grand challenge. There were, 7 other innovators who we supported, and I'm not going to go into each one of those. Some were product and service oriented. Others were, looking at sort of manufacturing and distribution of drugs. Others were sort of more focused on, policy and advocacy, like, for example, to the World Health Organization around general treatment protocols for Ebola, etc. So that's one in the public health space. This is another one in the smallholder farmer space, but I won't go into this one too much because it's similar to what Kristen has described above. But essentially what we have here is kind of a financial map of smallholder farmers' cash flows, planting, weeding, harvesting, planning and preparation phases throughout the year, and sort of all the different money flows around those processes. We mapped this through extensive user research with smallholding farmers, and then we used this to identify interesting opportunity areas for financial service providers, for seed and fertilizer providers, for big agricultural off-takers, basically companies that buy up produce, to figure out where they could provide support to farmers to help improve their yields through sort of like the provision of a range of services. So those are a few examples of the different types of work that we do. Some questions we get around it is like, how do we set up and structure a team? How deeply involved is the team in implementation, and how do we measure impact? I think the way that we set up and structure teams, we don't sort of take the approach that IDEO does, IDEO.org, where they have like one business strategist, one graphic or visual designer, one product designer, etc. on each team, and then like sort of staff the teams in that way. At Dig, everybody is everybody comes to Dig with different skill sets and different sort of perspectives, but because we are very small, we're constantly trying to build up each other's skills and really round out our areas of expertise. And so the teams are pretty flexible and pretty agile. And I think that, the most interesting thing is really that we're often cross-staffing our teams. We're pulling in, strategy consultants from Dahlberg. We're pulling in quantitative researchers from Dahlberg. So we're bringing all those skills to bear in the teams themselves. How deeply involved are we in implementation? In general, not very deeply. It just depends on the capacities of the client, whether they think they need our support or they have, the ability to do it in-house. And it also depends on the nature of the project itself. Like, not all of our work is product and service focused. A lot of it is programs and policies, which, we just wouldn't implement because those are implemented by, bureaucrats or by program staff at big NGOs and foundations. How do we measure the impact of our projects? So, it's tough to measure the impact of a project that you're not actually implementing. When we do implement it, we measure the impact pretty rigorously through a monitoring, evaluation, and learning strategy, and quantitative assessment that we do alongside some of our really skilled colleagues at Dahlberg. But where we're not actually implementing, it's difficult to really measure the impact beyond just looking at whether the client is sort of taking up this project or this program, this policy, this service, etc., and running with it, or whether the knowledge and perspective that we imparted on them from the end users is sort of has sort of changed their approach and their thinking, and they're just in the case of like big clients like the Gates Foundation, whether or not they're disseminating those learnings to the broader industry or community of stakeholders. So the way we measure impact sort of differs across the broader portfolio. Let's see. So I want to turn it over to Kristen here, and I want to get into the specific opportunities we have at Dig for you guys to join us, and the processes for sort of like applying and all of that. And we also want to make sure to reserve space for questions. So, Kristen, I turn over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, so as you can see on this slide, we currently have 2 hiring processes underway. I think many of you at this point, because we've been pushing really hard in the application outreach, are internships. We have internships right now open in all of our studios, and I'll talk more about those in a minute. And then on the other side, we have full-time opportunities. So right now we're looking most actively for full-time hires in Mumbai, London, and Nairobi. And you can see all of the listings for both sets of opportunities here on our website, dahlbergdesign.com/connect. Next slide, please. So internships, I've had some questions asking to clarify the different internships because some of them have the same name and some don't. This kind of speaks to our hiring process and speaks also to the kind of unconventional combination of skills and experience and kind of attitude that we look for in a Dahlberg person. It's not just someone who's a designer, it's not just someone who's a strategist, but it's someone who has both an approach to their work that is like truly putting the user first, is able to work with kind of rugged conditions, someone who's a little scrappy, someone who's going to be able to accomplish a lot in tough constraints. So given all of these kind of very interesting requirements for this type of work, in short, for most of our internships, we have a slightly generalized job description. So you'll see the research and design interns. There's a description for New York, London, and Mumbai, and it's a little bit different than the description for Nairobi. In Mumbai,
Kristen, it looks like your connection is not really holding up. So I can run through this. Okay. So where were we? Right. So we're hiring a number of interns in New York, London, and Mumbai. Again, across all three of those studios, we're looking for sort of, I think, like at the core of an internship really is design research. Design research draws on ethnography. It draws on, you know, participatory research methodologies that have been honed in the international development space. And it always has sort of like a design orientation, right? So, you know, how are we making this learning actionable? And, you know, at core, that's really what we're looking for in our new hires, is people who have either experience or a predisposition to doing this kind of work, which is very intense and very personal, because you're working usually in the context of people's homes, communities. You're sitting on the ground with a group of like 15 people, on a farm, and, you know, with pen and paper, just mapping out, you know, a lot of the constraints and opportunities to sort of define their lives, and thinking through ways around that, you know? So that, you know, those are really the core skills that we're looking for. There's obviously another set of skills that matter, particularly at the internship level, which is sort of, you know, graphic and visual design. You know, we do like to hire people who have that skill set. It's not a hard requisite, but it's a big plus. And then I think at the internship level, you know, if you have certain sectoral experience or expertise in international development, or analogous fields, that's a big plus as well. So in Nairobi, though, which is what Kristen was getting to, they're looking for a slightly, you know, more specific skill set, because they're really looking to build out the team there. So a lot of that is focused on this user research that we've been speaking about. So we're looking for people who really have the ability to think through, you know, design related challenges and put together like a cohesive and compelling research plan, research activities that, you know, really do sort of suggest a specific learning agenda that can lead to actionable insights and design outputs. So I think that, you know, in our other studios, New York, London, Mumbai, you know, we're a little bit more flexible, but in Nairobi, we really need people who sort of have those core design research skills. In New York, we're also very much open to hiring a handful of people with more of a public health background. So anybody who's really had sort of experience working in public health is a big plus, you know, particularly if you've done any prototyping around services and devices. So yeah, that's the general range of internships that we have available. We're also looking for, you know, graduate level people, but we're definitely not wedded to graduate level. Like, we are totally open to undergrads. I think the thing is, we want people who have some experience. So we say like 2 to 4 years of experience, like that's ideal. We recognize not everybody's going to have that much experience. That should not stop you from applying. You know, I think that the point is, like, we need people who actually have had experience doing sort of design research and design work, which you should sort of illustrate in your portfolios and, to a lesser extent, your resumes. The start dates for the internships are super variable. We have a lot of work this year and we need to bring more people on. So we're definitely looking to do so rather quickly. But again, we're flexible given the range of our need, and of course would like to make sure that we get the best talent, and we recognize that people have a lot of other things going on in their lives besides, you know, their internships. And so want to be open to that. Kristen, is there anything else you wanted to add here? I think you may be muted if you're still there, Kristen. If not, maybe you dropped off. Okay, looks like Kristen dropped off, so Kristen, are you there? So I think that I may have dropped off as well, but I am back. So let me just repeat what I had been saying. Sorry about that, a little technical difficulty here. I was just saying that we're also hiring for full-time opportunities in Mumbai, London, and Nairobi. And again, we would like to hire people who are from, you know, Kenya or East Africa or the broader African continent for, you know, open positions in Nairobi. And similarly, for open positions in India, we'd like to hire locals. But
Okay, guys, can you guys hear me okay? This is Kristen in Nairobi. I thought I just wasn't hearing Michael, and it looks like it might be his.
Can you hear me now, Kristen? Let's see here. 1 second, everyone. Slight connection challenges. Oh, I am back. Okay, cool. I am back. So let me just continue with that. So what I was going to say is, please don't let, you know, our preference for locals dissuade you. I'm American. I'm from the United States. Kristen's from the United States. Yet we're working here. Kristen's based in Nairobi. You know, so please do reach out to us if you're interested in full-time positions and you think you are qualified. Those positions are up on the website. You can reach us via email. The email convention is firstname.lastname@dahlberg.com. So I would be michael.mori@dahlberg.com. We should have included that here, but we didn't. You also have Kristen's email address, so she can forward you on, or you can copy the convention from her email and just reach out to one of us if you're interested in India, London, or New York City. But of course, if you're interested in Nairobi, reach out to Kristen. So let's take a few questions here. Let's see what we have in the YouTube Hangout. And Kristen, feel free to chime in as well. Okay, so we have a question. Is the Nairobi studio offering visual graphic design internships, or is it only people with experience in design research? Kristen, can you chime in on that? So Kristen is managing the process for the hires in Nairobi, and I don't actually know the answer to that, Wakasa. So we'll have to get back to you on that. My understanding is that they are primarily hiring for design researchers, but I think if you have a strong visual or graphic design internship and you are open to design research, an internship is a perfect opportunity to sort of for you to sort of like test that out. Like, are you somebody who likes and has a disposition towards the research component? And similarly on our end, it's a way for us to sort of evaluate whether we think that you would be a good fit for the research needs. So I would say that if you don't have a strong design research background, but you have a strong visual or graphic skill set, definitely apply. Okay, let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, would an industrial design background be appropriate for the design internship with the Mumbai office if my interests are design research? Yes, an industrial design background would definitely be appropriate. In India, we do a lot of work on medical device design, and so people who have that industrial design background, it's super helpful. So again, yeah, please do apply. Okay, let's see. For visual designers, any freelance opportunities to work? So John, Issa John, yes, there are freelance opportunities to work on specific projects. As I was mentioning earlier, we have a huge project load this year, and we're going to need to bring people on, and we will likely bring a lot of people on in a freelance capacity. That's a great way as well for you to get a chance to feel us out and for us to feel you out and, decide whether or not it's a good fit. So please, if you are interested in freelancing, also make that clear and do apply. Okay, how much are quantitative research method skills required in the internship positions? Not at all, but they are a big plus. If you do have that background, it's helpful. I do, I do a bit on the quantitative research end just because I have some experience in it, though I am primarily a designer, and it's always helpful. And it's particularly helpful in integrating with our colleagues at Dahlberg. Let's see. These internships are definitely open to mid-level professionals who are eager to take up design and learn the skill set. I like, just to give you a little bit of a background, I joined the Design Impact Group when I was 30, so a few years ago, 29, 30. Very much mid-career. I had been working for 7, 8 years, 5 years in international development, and just realized that I wanted to make the jump into design, and was able to do that through DIG. So it is open in that sense. Let me see. Okay, so since DIG isn't extremely involved in the implementation, are there cases where clients don't go ahead and implement the work? So yeah, definitely. And that's the case with all consulting work. All professional services works that way. Sometimes clients, totally buy up what you recommend, and sometimes they don't. And there are a lot of reasons why they will and a lot of reasons why they won't, many of which are just completely beyond your control. Do we integrate the sustainable development goals at all in our work, and if so, how? No, we don't. We only do insofar as clients do. So our work is social impact work. The sustainable development goals are like a nice framework, but we don't necessarily, we don't like use that. We don't use them as a framework to drive sort of our firm's, like our specific design practices strategy and business development. Though insofar as, development organizations are integrating SDGs into their portfolios. We sort of follow their lead where necessary. Okay, are there any particular HCD courses that we're aware of that we would recommend? So IDEO and Acumen, IDEO plus Acumen, they have a whole free HCD like course kit that involves a bunch of guides and materials that are super helpful if you've never really been experienced or exposed to HCD, and they also have like an online course. So definitely recommend checking that out if you haven't before. Let's scroll back down to the bottom and see what some of the more recent questions are that people have been asking. Okay. Should we be specifying the location or internship application, or will it be considered for all locations? So I think it's great for you to if you have a preference, to suggest the preference. And if you are open to multiple locations, make that clear to us. That would be very helpful on our end. But just because you say you have, you only want to work in one spot, or you have one particular preference, that doesn't mean that you can't sort of like change that later on and say, oh, actually, but just keep us posted of any changes. Is there another design for development firm with a West Africa office? Well, we don't have a West Africa office. Oh, well, sorry, we do have West Africa offices at Dahlberg, but we don't have any DIG studios embedded in those offices. Nevertheless, we do a lot of work in Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Ghana, etc. And when we do, we're based out of our offices there. But as far as I know, there are not other design firms that have that. Do internships sponsor visa for international hire by any chance? So would we sponsor a visa for somebody to do an internship in the United States if they were based abroad? Probably not. It's really difficult to even get our full-time staff visas for like the US. But if you are traveling, like with our internships, like you should expect to be on a full project cycle, which means you would be doing design research and like design work, prototyping, etc. in some of the communities where we work around the globe. So you would be traveling and you would need a visa to do that travel. And so when you apply, make sure you have a passport, make sure you are able to do international travel. And yes, we would sponsor your visas for that travel, but that's a lot different than sponsoring a work visa, for example, for the United States. Can you please give a glimpse of the kind of project areas presently going on in the Mumbai studio? Okay, so one project we're working on in the Mumbai studio right now is a project with a large Indian foundation who is trying to figure out a way to provide a suite of services for railway children. So these are children who run away from home or otherwise, are separated from their families and are sort of like hawking goods or services at railroad stations, or end up at a railroad station as their sort of first port of call after separating from their family. And this has been identified as a really good time to sort of intervene and provide a wide range of social services for those children, potentially help reconnect them with their families or get them foster families. And so that we're working on a project on that. We're also working on a fisheries related project in Indonesia. We may be working on a financial services project in Myanmar. So the Mumbai studio is really the base for a lot of our project work across Asia. A lot of that happens in India, but it also happens in other places. Let's see. Start date for full-time positions is totally flexible. We're just looking for the right people. Any note on relocation? I'm not really sure what that means. I mean, I think that the question could be related to visa sponsorship. Where possible, of course, we do sponsor visas. And we have had a lot of luck in terms of getting our own staff, visas to work in our studios. But again, it's challenging, but it is something we do. Let's see, any other questions? So does anybody have any other questions that I haven't touched on? Just drop them in if so. You just scroll up and double check that I may have touched on everything. Kristen, I don't know if you're there, but is there anything else you wanted to touch on? Okay. So if you're brought on as an intern in a particular location and are later considered for a full-time position, would it necessarily be in that same location or possibly other office locations? It could be in other office locations. Obviously, like, we're hiring, I mentioned, across our studios. It's totally possible that we have somebody doing an internship in Nairobi, and then it works out really well, and they want to go work out of the Mumbai studio, and that could be something that we would facilitate. Can you talk a bit about the different criteria used to evaluate full-time hires versus interns? Okay, yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, we expect a lot out of our staff, and we expect them to, first and foremost, be like really dedicated and effective learners. And that goes for interns as well as full-time staff. And so I think that the biggest difference is that, when it comes to internships, like we're definitely happy bringing on people who have less experience doing actual development work in country, right? So in communities. I think with full-time staff, we're looking for people who have definitely had that experience, for at least a couple of years, at least 1 to 2 years, and have a portfolio of work that sort of attests to it. And I think that really is the biggest difference. I would say that for full-time staff as well as with interns, we recognize that nobody has all the skills, nobody has all the experience, and we invest in our people to build those things up. So with full-time hires, though, what we tend to do is bring somebody on for a full project cycle as sort of like kind of a feel it out, like how does this work for everyone involved. And then evaluate from there. So we generally don't make an initial just like full hire. It's like we bring you on as a freelancer for like a 3 to 6 month project cycle, depending on the project, and then we sort of decide. Oh, lots of questions now. Okay. Academic study was meaning online course. What is the hiring process for full-time positions? So I think I just touched on that. Could you touch on any specifics for the London studio? Let's see, specifics for the London studio. So in London, it's similar to New York in the sense that most of our work is happening in Africa and Asia. And so you're going to be traveling a lot for project-related work. But the London studio and the New York studio, actually, all of our studios are really well integrated with Dahlberg. So there is a lot of other types of work that will happen in those studios themselves. The London studio is by far our smallest studio. And so it would not be, it would just be like, probably 2 to 3 people from DIG integrated with a bigger Dahlberg team of 15 to 20. How long is the duration? So the internships can be any duration. I mean, obviously they're not going to be a year-long internship, but minimum we would want like 6 to 8 weeks, and maximum would probably be 3 or 4 months, because I just can't imagine that you'd want to continue on an internship for more than that, though you may want to. There is a stipend. I'm not exactly sure what the level is, but we can get back to you on that. But I mean, it should be enough to cover basic living costs, but I'm not entirely sure. Behavioral economist position. Yeah, so the behavioral economist position is a full-time hire position. And really what we're looking for is somebody who has like a lot of experience in behavioral economics and specifically has experience in sort of in user-centered research within the behavioral economics field, not necessarily someone who is like focused on impact evaluation and statistical measurement, for driving, new thinking in behavioral economics. So we're looking for a particular type of behavioral economics who is much more sort of like hands-on and sort of has sort of an openness to an iterative design approach rather than sort of like an impact evaluation driven approach, which many in the field do have. I don't actually know what an industrial or organizational psychologist is, but that is a conversation we could have. So I can't really answer that question. What is the hiring process for the internships? Right, that's a great one. Okay, so with the internships, we are going to be closing out the application process at the end of the week, or on the 9th, I believe, or the 10th. It's posted anyways. And then we're going to spend a week doing a first round of reviews of the applications, a week or two actually, because it depends on how many we get. We may get 200-300 applications, in which case we need to spend more time reviewing them. And then we'll set up interviews for the next week or two. So we would hope to have this process sort of closed out by mid-April. And have offers made to everyone. And let's see, as for the last question, I think Kristen just answered it in the chat. Yes, we do work with local partners and NGOs on every single project. Okay, so we're about 5 minutes over. So I'm gonna let everybody go now, but thank you so much for your time, and I hope that you found this helpful, and please do follow up with any questions you have, and please apply. It would be fantastic to sort of have a really, really nice, robust pool of people. As I mentioned, we are growing a lot, and we're looking to hire interns, we're looking to bring on freelancers, we're looking to hire full-time positions. So over the next year, there's going to be a lot of opportunities. So even if the specifics of this internship program don't work out for you, timing-wise, it's not a good match, etc., there could be interesting other opportunities that come about. So please do apply. Okay, thank you all so much, and have a great day and a good week. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.